Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
After a divorce, the newspaper publishes a very interesting article about the wife in which she. Today's story with a subplot. Enjoy watching it. It had been more than 5 years since my wife of 15 years, Adelia Lynn Masters, a local Bank of America branch manager, asked me for a divorce. Her simple explanation was, "I don't love you anymore." She claimed that there was no one else involved. Adelia said that over time, we had simply grown apart. I had my doubts, but I could never prove anything. I had overheard her whispering on the phone about big changes in her life. Shortly after that night, we agreed to joint custody of our daughters, who were 14 and 12 years old at the time. In private consultations with professionals, both girls decided to live with her. I was remembering all of this because of an article in USA Today that I had signed up to receive this Thursday morning. It was an article about Regional Vice President Adelia Lynn Peterson and her husband, Senior Vice President Ronald Peterson, attending a charity event in New York City. Another photo showed their daughters, 19-year-old Amanda and 17-year-old Miranda Peterson, dressed elegantly, described as promising young ladies. It was definitely Adelia. She now had the status and prestige she had always wanted. The article mentioned how popular she was on social media. Her current husband had once been a casual friend of mine. We had all met shortly after Adelia started working with him at the local Bank of America branch. Their daughters, once mine, now lived with a different last name. My first thought was to call my trusted assistant, Helen Beard, into my office to confirm that my eyes were seeing what I thought they were. If my vision was correct, it would explain why the search for them all had been fruitless. Helen was also my wife's distant cousin, but she was on vacation that day for personal reasons. On the day our divorce was supposed to be finalized, my wife Adelia did not show up. I asked my lawyer to find out why before we moved forward without her. The judge had ordered both of us to be present so that we could confirm to him that the documents presented to the court had been approved by both of us. Her lawyer acknowledged that she had been transferred to another state. My lawyer asked if I had given her permission to take the children out of state, and I answered in the negative. That's when my nightmare began. Judge Donald McDonald's attitude shifted in an instant. Upon learning this fact, he asked me to step out and try to call them on my cell phone. I left the courtroom and tried. I discovered that the numbers I had were no longer in service. I checked their Facebook pages and found I had been unfriended and blocked. I returned to the courtroom and told my lawyer everything I had just learned. He relayed the information to the judge, who immediately issued a warrant for my wife's arrest on charges of child abduction. He suspended the divorce proceedings until she appeared in person before the court. Her lawyer was furious and tried to appeal to the judge's common sense, hoping to get him to reconsider his decision. The lawyer implied that it was not such a big deal, saying, in the end, Mr. Masters can confirm that they had reached an agreement. The judge replied, yes, he can. He just confirmed that he did not consent to the children being taken out of state. The lawyer tried again, claiming that might not be true. He might be lying. Exactly, the judge said, and that's why she should be here. He added to his order, demanding both daughters be present as well. Later, the police told me that during their investigation, her family claimed she had told them many terrible things about me, and they believed her. Employees at the local Bank of America branch readily confirmed these claims when asked by the police, though when it came time to present evidence, none could provide any. It was all just Adelia's words, accepted as truth because they knew her. Why does it matter? He's just a man, was the response. When they privately questioned members of our extended family, even social services, who had interviewed the children, knew nothing about these new allegations. They found nothing in their interviews to suggest anything untoward. However, rumors spread by word of mouth through our city, fueled by members of Adelia's extended family over the past 5 years. The judge and I stayed in touch, developing a friendship over our shared love of fly fishing. He wasn't surprised when I showed up at his house that night after dinner. There's a reason I brought the newspaper, I said, seriously. You need to see this. I opened the paper to the article and let him see for himself. Son of a, the judge muttered. Ruth, could you pass me my phone? John said. I need a moment, please, Donald. In the photo below the article, those are my daughters, I pointed out. The judge's face turned pale. Good heavens, they've been right in front of us this whole time. I walked out onto their patio and sat down, while Ruth followed, bringing us both beers. He's livid. I've never seen him so angry. He's calling the FBI, I said. What did you show him? Ruth asked. A photograph from today's newspaper of my missing wife and her new husband. This is the first clue I've had that she's still alive after 5 years, I replied. The second photo is of my daughters, with new last names. That's it, then. He called the FBI because interstate child abduction is a federal crime, Ruth remarked. Why didn't Bank of America help you find her? She continued. They got a ruling from a federal appeals court that allowed them to ignore my husband's court order, arguing it was a private family matter, and they didn't need to comply, I said. Tell the judge I went home because I was overwhelmed. Let him know he can reach me at my office in the morning, I added. That night was long and difficult for me. Was their relationship more than just professional? We were already married when she started working in the financial loans department, which he headed. At that time, I was just starting my consulting firm. The question of whether my daughters were truly mine or his weighed heavily on my mind. Did any of us know the real truth? I reminded myself that Amanda was already born when Adelia joined the bank. The next morning, my thoughts turned to Helen. How would she take all this? Over the past 5 years, her disdain for her cousin had only grown stronger. I knew she believed in me. Her actions over the years had made that clear. There were many times when I wanted to embrace her, to tell her how I felt, but I hadn't. She deserved the best a man could offer, and with everything I was dealing with, I wasn't that man. Helen was a wonderful woman. Her brown hair, soft smile, and warm heart were traits anyone would treasure. I often dreamed about her, but that was all I allowed myself. No man should ask a woman to share his burden. The next day at work was stressful, and for that, I was grateful. It kept my mind occupied. Toward the end of the day, my assistant knocked and entered the room. John, 2 gentlemen from the FBI are here to see you. Shall I let them in? Helen asked. Of course, I've been expecting them, I replied, standing up. How can I help? I asked as they entered. I'm Mac Holmes, and this is Douglas Dale. Mac introduced themselves. We're here to gather some information about your situation. I explained how I had met Adelia's current husband many years ago. As far as I knew, there hadn't been any romantic involvement back then, but considering their current relationship and the change in my daughter's last names, questions had arisen. I think the only way to know for sure is for us all to take DNA tests. I believed Amanda, my eldest, was born before her mother started working at Bank of America, but now I wonder if my wife knew him before that. I told them that Judge Donald McDonald had paused the divorce proceedings after filing child abduction charges when Adelia ignored the court order by failing to appear. You'll need to check if she filed for divorce in New York and if her marriage to him is even legal. So you're saying the judge never finalized the divorce? Douglas asked. That's right. The court records will show that the divorce wasn't granted because she didn't appear in court to confirm that both of us approved the documents, I replied. Judge Donald doesn't allow himself to be misled by the nonsense of others. He's like this in every case, ever since a dishonest lawyer once deceived him. Did you give your wife permission to leave the state with your children? Mac asked. No. We found out from her lawyer that she had moved to another state. The judge asked me to try and contact them on their cell phones. When I got back, I told him their numbers were disconnected and that I'd been unfriended on Facebook. So she moved out of state before the divorce was finalized and got married less than a week later? Douglas asked. Exactly. This shows everything she did was premeditated, not an accident, Max said. This contradicts what she claimed during her interview in New York this morning. When was the last time you spoke to your wife? Douglas asked. It was 2 weekends before our last court date, when Adelia and our daughters came to take the last of their belongings from our home. Child Services spoke to them both, and my daughters decided they should live with their mother. Since then, I've received no legal notices or public updates in the local newspaper, so I believe it's safe to say we're still married, I explained. This means his signature must have been forged on the adoption papers, Mac said. We can charge them for attempting to cover up a federal crime. I asked what kind of adoption documents they were referring to, but received no response. Mr. Masters, could you please provide us with a sample of your signature? Mac asked. Helen, type a letter on our letterhead with the text, at the request of Mr. Pamela Holmes and Douglas Dale of the FBI, this letter confirms my consent to provide a sample of my signature. I need you to witness this and make a copy for our records before I give them the original, I said, knowing she was listening carefully to every word. Are you still living at 87654 Yale Road East? Mac asked. No, I had to get a court order to sell it. The police were tired of the rumors about a supposed predator living in the area, so they helped me get a court order from Judge McDonald to sell the house after I was attacked and hospitalized for the second time. The judge froze all our assets when Adelia failed to appear in court. I now live outside the city in a house I built on Ryder Lake. It's a very secluded place, with 5 acres of land that I own. I installed an electric fence for security, as many people still believe the lies that were spread after they left. I told Helen what was happening, and she was shocked to learn that her older, distant cousin had been found. I could see hope in her eyes, mixed with questions. There were still too many uncertainties, and I had no answers yet. Helen, when I leave tonight, my cell phone will be off. If anything concerning my situation comes up, use your best judgment. In an emergency, call me at home, I instructed. Helen despised her cousin Adelia for ruining John's reputation and damaging his relationships. John had lost many friends and family due to the rumors Adelia spread. Helen couldn't believe the extent of the harm until she saw it with her own eyes. She often wondered how much more John would have to endure before the truth prevailed. It was hard for her to sit back and wait for everything to resolve itself. From her observations, she believed that lies were often accepted as truth. Most people thought that if it weren't for his company, John would have given up long ago. He had buried himself in work, tripling his customer base. 2 years ago, he started to come out of his protective shell, but she noticed that the fresh trout she would receive from him had stopped. What surprised Helen the most was that during all these years, she had never heard the names of his wife or children mentioned until today. She had watched helplessly as he faded away, and now he was just a shadow of his former self. Helen had been 14 when she first met 19-year-old John Masters at the family's pre-Christmas party. Adelia had just announced her engagement and was the center of attention. Helen immediately realized that the relationship wouldn't last long. John was a financial consultant, good at making money, while Adelia was a social climber seeking attention, prestige, and fame. He always put his family first, and as long as Adelia felt like she was receiving enough attention, the relationship would continue. Helen had told Adelia's mother that if they had children, the marriage would end as soon as the kids hit adolescence. She had been right. Helen's own marriage hadn't lasted long either, as her husband died while serving in the army, before they had the chance to become parents. As a result, when she needed advice, she turned to John. He had helped her through hard times, stood by her when she buried her husband, and supported her during her mourning period. He wasn't just her boss, he had become her best friend. Over the past 5 years, she had seen John go through his own personal hell, and it made her realize that he was the man she wanted to grow old with. John's biggest struggle was that no matter what he did, his past haunted him every day. The disappearance of Adelia and the children fueled rumors that John had killed them to protect his image. People believed the reason he had so much security was because their bodies were buried on his property. For the first time in a long while, I went to Ruby Tuesdays for dinner. I ordered unlimited access to the salad bar and a portion of catfish. I had just returned to my table after my first helping of salad when Adelia's father, Roger Carmichael, appeared without invitation. He pulled out a chair and sat down. "I heard from Adelia this morning," Roger said. I remained silent and continued eating. I had nothing to say to this man. The last time he had spoken to me in public, he threatened to find a way to kill me. Public confrontations like this only worsened my problems, causing more rumors to spread. "Amanda and Miranda are doing well," Roger said quietly. "My daughter wants to find a way to resolve the issues from the past. Adelia finally admitted to me that you never did any of the things she accused you of." She used those false accusations to justify disappearing from the city. I want to find a way to apologize to you. I also know she has spoken to several relatives today. Tell everyone she spoke to that I will believe their sincerity when they provide notarized statements explaining what she said and why, I said. Once they do that and come to my office to give it to me, I'll believe them. Until then, even this conversation is meaningless. Until that happens, you're all dead to me. Damn, that's harsh, John, said Roger. But I understand where you're coming from. Do you really understand? I'm just treating you the way you've treated me for the past 5 years. Think about that for a while. Now leave me alone and let me eat in peace, I replied coldly. I reminded him that thanks to the rumors spread by his family, many in this town thought I should be dead for something I never did. I watched Roger leave, wondering if he really thought a 2-minute conversation would fix his daughter's problems. Did he think sitting down with me for 120 seconds could erase 5 years of hatred, pain, and suffering that his family caused? Did they believe it would be so simple? Did they think I was stupid enough to pretend nothing had happened? A few minutes later, the waitress who had been serving me came and sat down. Mr. Masters, I went to school with your daughters, she began. From what I overheard, neither of them knew what was going on before they disappeared. On the Friday before they left, we were planning to meet up at school the following Monday. I saw the man who just left working with other members of your wife's family, helping them pack. Thanks for your honesty. That's refreshing, I replied. I didn't even know that. But it doesn't surprise me. I've been lied to for years. I usually keep to myself because I'm tired of hearing the whispers and lies they spread about you, she said, returning to her work. When I paid the bill, I left her the best tip of the night. I had a great weekend at the lake, fishing in my canoe every day. I kept my limit of catches and released the rest. One of my favorite meals these days is fresh rainbow trout fried in flour and butter. Both evenings, I had 2 fish with eggs and toast. Early Monday morning, I was at work, brewing my first cup of coffee and reading USA Today. I was a little disappointed that nothing had come of the conversation yet, but I realized I was hoping for too much too quickly. Helen arrived half an hour early, which only happens when something significant is on her mind. She was in an unusually good mood, clearly excited about something. After pouring herself a cup of coffee, she joined me. Looking back, I said, I spent the first few years buying houses, renovating them, and selling them at a profit. You took those courses and started working as a bank teller. I learned the financial business from the ground up. One of the former owners noticed my natural abilities and became my mentor. When the partner retired, Masters Consulting was founded, and they worked part-time for me, helping the company grow rapidly. When Miranda was born, I had my entire future mapped out. I heard what you said to Roger on Friday, Helen said. Damn, everyone heard. My phone rang all weekend. I told everyone, do you really blame him after everything his family did to him? You all turned him into the walking dead in this town. I have one question for you, boss. Why do you need notarized statements? I smiled. Public lies. Oh damn, Helen said. You're going to sue her for everything she has, aren't you? Wouldn't you? I asked. Yes. It's the only way to clear your name and restore your reputation. By obtaining a court order to freeze their funds until my defamation suit is resolved, I'm limiting them. It forces them to rely on a public defender. Would you want to go to federal court with a free lawyer? Well, boss, it's going to be an interesting week. If all those who called me over the weekend keep their word, we'll have about 20 statements by the end of the day, Helen said. Most of the family are generally honest people. The problem, as I've been pointing out all weekend, is that they mistook lies for truth. I told them to think about it when they went to church on Sunday. The question is, will their own guilt motivate them to do what's right? As she walked toward her desk, she turned around with a playful smile. Boss, remember, some of us single girls really enjoy morning fishing trips. For the first time in many years, I laughed. At the end of the day, I thanked Helen for making me smile. Helen had always been, and would always be, my rock. I firmly believe that without her, I wouldn't have survived the nightmare of the last 5 years. By Thursday afternoon, We had 24 signed and notarized statements, all essentially saying the same thing. My wife, Adelia, told everyone that she had to leave town because I had humiliated and abused her for years, and that she finally found the strength to leave. She claimed she had filed for divorce on those grounds. If any of them had bothered to check the court records, they would have seen for themselves that she was lying. Some even helped her secretly leave the city with our 2 daughters, promising to remain silent. All admitted that Adelia had called them last week, attempting to resolve past issues. At the same time, she confessed that everything she had said about me was untrue. In my opinion, Adelia was more concerned with preserving the new life she had built for herself. She felt no remorse or guilt for what she had done. If I hadn't seen her picture in the newspaper, she would have continued living as though nothing had happened. I knew that since my daughters never tried to contact me, they believed every word she had told them. The best I could hope for, given the facts that had come to light, was the satisfaction of knowing that perhaps justice would be served. I concluded that, for my daughters and much of the family, I had been completely removed from their lives. Helen was able to track down Adelia's current legal address, place of work, and her status there. Your appointment with the civil lawyer is set for 2. Make sure Adelia is notified before she's charged. Also, remember you want to obtain a court order to freeze their assets, she said. Damn, I thought. Helen hadn't missed a thing. God help Adelia if she ever meets Helen face to face, because Helen won't hold back. I returned to the office around 5:30 with a chilled bottle of champagne and 2 long-stemmed glasses. The lawyer Helen chose took on the case. I handed over all the old court records, transcripts, affidavits, all signed, along with a copy of the warrant for Adelia's arrest. I also gave her a copy of the article about my wife's new life. I made sure the lawyer knew every detail about what had happened. When she learned about the involvement of Bank of America, she said, "We should sue them too, for knowingly assisting in an attempt to ruin your life." "If one claim covers the other, I'm on board," I said. She smiled. "All right, we'll include everything." I smiled back, knowing how Americans are quick to sue when the situation calls for it. Helen and I shared the bottle of champagne, each enjoying 2 glasses. We were chatting when the phone rang. Helen answered it, and after hanging up, she said, "It's the judge." I turned on the speakerphone. "Hi, Donald. How are you today?" "Everything's fine, considering the circumstances," Donald said. "I'm calling to inform you that the FBI is moving forward with convening a grand jury against Adelia Lynn Peterson and Ronald Emerson Peterson next Wednesday. They're also seeking a protective order for Miranda Peterson and a warrant to compel DNA tests for all 5 of you. Your eldest daughter is now an adult, so they have no power over her," he added. "Thank you for the information." "It's very valuable," I said. "Now, regarding my divorce, I'll proceed on favorable terms as soon as Adelia is back in my court, even if it's via video." Donald replied, "I'll hold her accountable for her actions." Helen chimed in after the call ended. "The judge is going to deal with her seriously. But can he actually put her in jail?" "I think the kidnapping charges, and any related ones, will fall under the FBI's jurisdiction. But the judge could still issue a contempt charge for her failure to appear," I said. "I'm not entirely sure what the law allows in this case." "I suppose we'll have to wait again," Helen said with a touch of sadness. "Yes. I've been waiting over 5 years. A few more weeks won't make much difference. Besides, this gives the lawyer more time to coordinate with the court and notify Adelia. If anyone else knew something, they kept quiet." The next week passed quickly. On Thursday morning, my lawyer called to inform me that Adelia had been served with the documents at work on Wednesday. She also mentioned she had successfully frozen all assets in Adelia's name. That afternoon, FBI agent Doug Dale called and asked me to stop by St. Francis Hospital for a DNA test before 6 p.m. I gladly complied. On Saturday morning, while I was fishing at the lake, my cell phone rang. I saw it was Helen. "You should go to the office and check today's USA Today," she said. "It reports how Adelia, Ronald, and Miranda were arrested by the FBI last night at another social event. I'm on the lake, heading to shore." "I'll go to the office as soon as I've changed," I replied, curiosity getting the better of me. It took about an hour to get there. Helen was right. But what really caught my eye was what the journalist had written. Child abduction is a criminal offense, and it's just one of the charges Adelia and Ronald Peterson face. After leaving Missouri with her children without consulting her husband, Adelia filed for divorce, claiming she no longer loved him. When she failed to appear in court, a judge issued a warrant for her arrest for child abduction. It was our article from 3 weeks ago that led to her arrest. Apparently, Adelia used the surname Masters when she married Ronald Peterson in a civil ceremony in New York, just a week after leaving Missouri. We've learned that the paperwork filed for Ronald Peterson's legal adoption of Amanda and Miranda Masters was falsified. Mr. John Masters' signature was forged. The FBI now believes that this was done by the couple to conceal Masters' daughters in plain sight. It seems the couple had worked together at Bank of America years ago when they were starting their careers. Mr. John Masters attempted to compel Bank of America to reveal his wife's whereabouts, but they obtained an appellate court order allowing them to bypass the requirement. Now, it appears that Ronald Peterson, as a senior vice president at Bank of America, used his influence and power to prevent his wife's first husband from locating his legal wife and children. We have also learned that Mr. John Masters has filed a civil lawsuit against Adelia Peterson, as she told more than 20 of her family members and friends that she left her first husband because he abused and humiliated her. 5 years later, local police report that they are still receiving accusations against him. They assert these claims are false, and Mr. Masters was forced by public opinion to live in isolation. When I asked the police officer if things were really that bad for John Masters, he responded, "We still have 2 open attempted murder cases where he was the victim. Many people here believe he killed 3 people and got away with it." He also filed a lawsuit against Bank of America and its senior vice president, Ronald Peterson, for interfering in his marriage. Let's consider this from the victim's perspective for a moment. Don't you think he deserves justice? I do. But what does he get? Nothing, because our society doesn't account for this when dealing with criminals. They can express their opinions, but it doesn't get published because it doesn't sell papers. Often, the victim pays the price for years, while the criminal gets away with it. The article was astonishing, with all the facts laid out. I had just poured myself another cup of coffee when the phone rang. "This is Masters Consulting. How may I help you?" I answered. It was a reporter from the Southeast Missouri newspaper. I confirmed that the entire situation described in the article was true. The reporter asked, out of curiosity, how the last 5 years had been for me. I explained the 2 still open cases of attacks by unknown individuals, both investigated as attempted murder. I also recounted how far the rumors had spread. He then asked me, "How do you feel about everything you've been through?" "I would call it a living nightmare," I replied. It was hard to believe the ordeal was finally coming to an end. To some extent, my name had been cleared, but I knew that the past 5 years had irreparably damaged my relationships with my daughters, just as the rumors had destroyed my relationships with my parents and siblings. When it was all over, I decided to sell the business and leave the area forever if the only person I trusted agreed to leave with me. Before leaving the office, I cut out the article and photos, scanned them, and printed copies. I placed them in a legal envelope for my civil lawyer to use in my case. Amanda Peterson was shocked when the FBI detained her mother and stepfather. After their arrest, agents took her little sister into another vehicle. One of the agents kindly took Amanda aside and explained as much as he could. He informed her that her real parents were not divorced, that her father had never agreed to change her last name or give up custody, and that both she and her sister had been misled. The FBI announced that all documents containing her father's signature were proven to be forgeries. Her mother was now facing 2 counts of child abduction, while her stepfather was charged with kidnapping, aiding, and abetting a federal crime. Both were also facing numerous other charges. Miranda would be held in protective custody until DNA tests could confirm her biological father's identity, as her mother still claimed she belonged to her current husband. Amanda went home to pack her things. She later sat in the lounge at St. Louis Airport, waiting for her connecting flight to Cape Girardeau. That's when she noticed the headline on a USA Today newspaper left on an empty seat beside her. She picked it up and read the entire article. By the time she finished, she was in tears. During the hour-long flight to the Cape, Amanda kept trying to make sense of why her mother had done what she did to her father. None of it made sense. Of course, her mother had confided in her about Ronald and their online relationship, but Amanda never thought it would go this far until her mother asked her father for a divorce. She recalled sitting on the steps leading to the bedrooms in their old house when she overheard her mother tell her father that she no longer loved him and wanted a divorce. Her father had been depressed at the time, but her mother seemed indifferent, as though it didn't matter because he was just another man, one of many. Now, with the newspaper in her hands, Amanda had even more questions about her mother's previous relationship with Ronald. As she watched the plane begin to descend, she wondered if the airport car rental office still had a phone. It was 11 o'clock in the morning when Amanda Peterson parked at their old house, waiting for the sheriff's car to leave. She had been there for over 2 hours already. Suddenly, her car was blocked by 2 unmarked vehicles. An officer with a weapon identified himself and asked her to step out of the car with her hands up. She complied. "Who are you and why are you monitoring this place?" asked the tall officer. "My name is Amanda Peterson. I was waiting for the sheriff's department to leave so I could talk to my father," Amanda replied. "And what is your father's name?" the officer inquired. "John Masters," Amanda answered. "Oh," said the officer in complete shock. "Tom, go tell Joanne and Jody to put the coffee on. This isn't what we thought. All 5 of us need to have a long talk. Miss Peterson, I'm Detective Joel Smithers. I know your father well. What brings you here after all this time?" "Part of what happened last night and the article in today's USA Today. I have a copy in the car. Should I take it?" Amanda asked. "Please take it, it will help you understand," Joel said. After introductions and coffee, Detective Joel Smithers read the entire article aloud. Everyone was amazed except him. "You believe my father didn't do it, didn't you, Detective?" Amanda asked. "I was one of the few, but yes. Since the rumors started spreading from your mother and her family about your father, it was already too late. He was persecuted. This house was vandalized so often that he had no choice except to sell it. I think the second time he was hospitalized after the attack nearly finished him off completely. We were fortunate to get to him before he died. People here wanted to do with him what they wanted. Many believe that you are all dead and that it was his doing. Your father, for many people here, was considered guilty. Jod bought this house for a fairly small price, but it took until he started bringing home the sheriff's car for things to calm down. Are you saying things were so bad for my father that he had to leave?" Amanda asked. "Yes. Many of us in the South still have our own views on what justice is. Your father has 5 acres on Ryder Lake, but it's completely fenced in with an electric fence and secured with an electronic lock. In the 2 years he has lived there, except for work, no one has seen him in the city," Joel explained. "How can I contact him?" Amanda wondered aloud. "I think I know how," said Tom. "I'll ask dispatch to see if his business has an emergency contact. Be back in a minute." A few minutes later, Tom returned with the address written on a piece of paper. "Miss Peterson, do you know Ellen Bird?" Tom asked. "She's my mother's cousin, as far as I know." "Why?" Amanda replied. "According to our emergency records, she is the only one who can contact him at any time," Tom said. "I talked to her, and she agreed to talk to you without making any promises. An official fact about Miss Bird, which I just learned, she is tough, cold, and protective of her boss like a mother eagle with her chicks. If she doesn't believe you, she will do everything in her power to make sure you never get close to him. She's already on her way to his business. She said she'll be waiting for you there." Amanda thanked them for their help before heading off. What kind of person would hate a man enough to do what Adelia did to John? Jod asked. "The one who blames him for all the problems in her life," answered Joanne. As the car approached, Helen Bird turned on the voice recording app on her phone and opened the door to let Amanda into the building. "The first question I want answered, Amanda, is what was happening at the time of your disappearance and what did you know and find out later?" Helen asked. "Miranda and I were woken up by my mother at 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. She dragged me out of bed, half asleep. We were told to get dressed and go out. We got outside and saw that the car was already loaded with our things. She said that she had a week's vacation and we were going to New York as a surprise, Amanda said. That was the first time we heard about it. So, you didn't know what was really going on? Helen said. According to what some family members say, they knew about Ronald and my mother's online relationship, but they thought it was just friendship. Listen, I saw my mom texting Ronald, but I didn't know they worked together when we were younger. She told me she met him at a regional conference and they became friends, Amanda replied. We were driving for half an hour when I realized we didn't have phones. Then I asked my mom. Her answer was that the court awarded her sole custody of us and we were moving to New York because she was promoted and transferred on short notice. Now I know it was part of a lie, but at that time, I had no reason not to believe it. Helen Bird knew that part of this was true based on what others were now saying, who were finally beginning to admit that Adelia's children did not know her plans. I also asked about our laptops. Mom said the phones had been turned off due to the move and she had to pay the rest of the debt. As for the laptops, the movers had to pack them and ship them when they moved the furniture. We didn't know where they were, and they will never arrive, Amanda said. We drove over 20 hours in 2 days. When we got to the outskirts of New York, Mom told Miranda to open her bag and get a new phone. It had a New York number, which we didn't know she had until then. Then she asked her sister to open Google Maps and gave us a bunch of directions. We didn't know we were being directed to Ronald Peterson's house. We found out 2 hours later that he had given her a significant promotion and organized everything so they could be together. The family here was tasked with getting rid of everything except family photos, which were later sent to us while we were unloading the car. Miranda and I found the completed adoption papers, Amanda explained. It was Ronald who explained that our parents agreed to this because Mom and he were going to get married. Amanda continued, Mom told us later that night that we should give Ronald and her a chance because he is our biological father. We were gradually led to believe that when Dad found out about Ronald's real relationship with us, he decided there was nothing else for him except to erase us from his life. Amanda, I believe you because I've already heard about 50% of what you said from my family over the past few days. The only thing we knew for sure was that the school district provided Adelia with printed copies of your school records so you could register at the new school once you found a place to live. Now that Adelia has been found, the truth is out. Just so you know, I recorded our conversation. As soon as I give it to the FBI and your father, we will go to Ruby Tuesdays for an early dinner, Helen said. While I'm at it, look at these copies of statements made with the notary. Think about it, if she lied to you about your father John Masters, could she also lie about Ronald Peterson? Helen went into the other room and watched Amanda for a few minutes before relaying their conversation. Amanda learned how much her family conspired with her mother against John. She forwarded the conversation to John first, then to a civil lawyer because Amanda's honest statement was so damaging. Then she sent it to the FBI. All this time, she watched Amanda and made no attempts to contact anyone before Helen returned. She received a message from John, I'll be waiting for your arrival. Thank you, she wrote back. She left Helen alone for half an hour to read some statements they received from the family. Helen made no attempt to contact anyone. I will get back to her with this, Helen said as she returned to Amanda. Helen, do you have any idea why my mother told the family that my father mistreated and abused her for years? Amanda asked. No one in the family ever approved of your father. Your mother knew this. I think she used it to explain her need to disappear and move so suddenly. Adelia also knew that your father would be looking for you, and he actually did. He even tried to sue Bank of America to find out where she was and won, but then lost in the appellate court, Helen explained. We didn't know about your mother's marriage and last name change until a few weeks ago when her photograph appeared in the newspaper. When your father was served with a summons, Adelia contacted the family in a failed attempt to get rid of her growing problems. For over 5 years, your father was a persecuted man because of your mother's actions. I thought we were going to lose him twice. How is he now? Amanda asked. Seriously, he became withdrawn and lost a lot of weight. The stress he felt all this time turned his hair almost completely gray. His Facebook page was flooded with hate and threats to the point that he had to close his account. This forced him to remove his name from the corporate Facebook page because they were attacking him too. They were trying to destroy his business and life. He has learned not to trust anyone and only trusts a few people. He used to be so outgoing, now he is quiet and reserved. He has no choice. He is free, but not because there are not those who still want to bring their version of justice, Helen explained. He travels out of town to do any personal shopping for the house. He is gradually getting better, but even his own family turned their backs on him. Divorce is usually hard, but what happened to him was much worse. People here still believe that he was responsible for the three of you and got away with it. Does Dad have a girlfriend? Amanda asked. With the reputation your mother gave him, would you date him? Helen asked. For over 5 years, he defended himself against lies that he could not refute. Amanda said nothing for a few minutes, then said, every time he tried to defend himself, he only made the situation worse because people already had an opinion. He was forced to go alone. The disappearance made the mother's version believable. Adelia and Ronald planned everything well. The only one who really got hurt was your father. It got to the point where I was afraid he would take his own life, Helen said as tears began to flow. Let's go eat. At that moment, Amanda realized the price Helen had paid. She stood by her father all these 5 years. How much did she lose to do this? As they headed towards Helen's car, Amanda stopped. Thank you, Helen, she said, for having the courage to stand by and love my father. Helen, unable to hold back her tears, burst into sobs. Amanda consoled her. I sat in my car at Ruby Tuesdays, waiting for them to arrive, trying to figure out what to say to my oldest daughter, whom I hadn't seen in over 5 years. My emotions were raging. I replayed Helen and Amanda's conversation several times. I believed what I heard, but not entirely. I saw them approach, get out of the car, and head to the front door. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely light a cigarette. I was a bundle of nerves. Amanda had blossomed into a wonderful woman. I saw many features of my mother in her, which upset me because they had disowned me shortly after my wife and daughters disappeared. Finishing my cigarette, I turned off the car and prepared for one of the shortest but longest walks of my life. The waitress who served me a couple of weeks ago was the hostess on duty. She immediately said, Amanda is here. I talked to her. I seated her and her friend in the far corner. Are you here to meet them? When I said yes, she said she would seat me so that Amanda would see me as soon as I arrived. She led me back. Helen saw me immediately and smiled. I walked over and sat next to her, taking her hand for support. For the first time in 5 years, I looked directly into my daughter's bright blue eyes. Without saying a word, we both saw our tears begin to flow. Sometimes, you just don't know what to say. This was one of those moments. I asked the hostess to bring us a large carafe of their house wine. When the wine arrived, the waitress silently poured it into glasses and left us alone. Amanda was shocked by how much her father had changed. He had probably lost about 40 pounds. Even his face looked longer, thinner, and older. His gray hair may have added to his age. Many women would pay a lot of money to have that look at his age. Deciding that one of them should say something, Amanda stood up. I responded in kind. We met at the edge of the table in a big hug. Dad, she exclaimed. I answered, Amma, my old nickname for her. We broke the ice, and after our emotions calmed down, we ordered our food. Amanda was surprised at how my preferences had changed. I had always been a meat eater and loved potatoes, so my plate was always filled with starch. Now, I ordered a portion of catfish with unlimited access to the salad bar. I filled my plate with salad 3 times as Helen did the same. It gave Amanda a chance to talk to me alone. Helen loves you, Dad, probably more than I do, Amanda said. She interrogated me like an old army sergeant before she decided I was being honest. She wasn't going to give me a chance to hurt you again. I have to admit I had a chance to figure it out on my own, but I didn't. I don't think I will ever forgive myself for this. Amanda, I didn't have a life to offer anyone for those 5 years. At any moment, if the body of one of you had been found, I would most likely have ended up in prison. Most people here thought that I somehow killed the 3 of you and escaped punishment, I said. I knew this, so I changed my will 3 years ago, leaving everything to Helen. After the second attack and hospitalization, I thought the time had come. She was the one who brought me back from this brink. Helen returned to find Amanda in tears. What did you tell her? Helen asked. That it started again, I said. Nothing special, just that 3 years ago, when I was in the hospital and decided it was time to leave, I changed my will, leaving everything to you. I said it was your love that brought me back from the brink. After lunch, we went to return the rental car. The women then followed me to my home on Ryder Lake. They admired my secluded home overlooking the lake, with 4 bedrooms upstairs, a great room, living room, kitchen, laundry room with an open floor plan, and a master bedroom on the main floor with a covered passage from the garage to the house. I offered to carry Amanda's luggage upstairs, but she refused. I thought she felt we needed some alone time. Why didn't you tell me how you felt before? Helen asked. I couldn't. I was trapped in my past, I replied. I didn't know whether the body would show up or not. Not knowing is worse than knowing. Adelia and Ronald knew this and used it to their advantage. Now that I'm free from the box they put me in, I can offer you a future, and I couldn't before because I didn't have one. Helen took my hand with a smile on her face. I think I'll put my house on the market because there's no way I'm letting you sell this one. No matter how old you are, you still feel a little guilty when your daughter catches you kissing another woman. I know because that's exactly what she did. For the next hour, we sat and caught up on what I had missed in my daughter's life. I learned that she works in a business that isn't producing much and is studying online for her MBA. She wasn't dating seriously. Why don't you come work for us? I said. We can afford it, and we need fresh perspectives. You can start in a junior position and work your way up, I said. After everything we've been through, are you serious? Amanda asked. Yes, we're serious, Helen replied with the biggest smile I've ever seen. We can start with an annual salary of $45,000. Wow, I guess I'm going to have to find a place to live, Amanda said. Take your time. We have plenty of space here, I said. But I will expect you to perform household duties as before. Amanda responded with tears in her eyes. Dad, why? You have always been an important part of my life, I replied. I'll fly out tomorrow morning to pack if I can find a flight. Depending on how long it takes, I'll be back by Wednesday, Amanda said. Let's add your numbers to my contacts, I suggested. We had just finished adding numbers when Amanda received a text from Miranda. Amanda showed it to me. Finally, my cell phone was returned. The FBI is holding me until DNA results are available to confirm whether Ronald Peterson is my father or not. They showed me how experts proved that the adoption documents were forged. I can't make calls, but I can send and receive messages since it's a secure sender. Amanda replied, with my real dad, I'm flying to New York tomorrow to pack my things, moving back home and joining his firm. This is his number. Miranda replied, bring my things too and my laptop. Let the rest remain. Amanda responded, try to get today's USA Today. You need to read the article about us. It explains a lot of things I didn't know. Call me as soon as you can so I can tell you more. Helen saw me walk out onto the patio and followed me. How do you feel? She asked. Emotionally overwhelmed, I replied, hugging her. How about I take Amanda with me and go to my place to get my things? This will give you time to sort your thoughts out, Helen suggested. I sent her the electronic gate lock program on her phone so she could open it and gave her the keys to the house, offering to make 4 copies. They left for about 2 hours. I spent most of this time in tears, realizing that the pain and resentment I had been carrying for so long were finally coming out. I was right, my behavior made it clear that the dam had broken. When they returned, I was smiling just like them. I was out on the patio, preparing the grill for some steaks I had defrosted, already made a salad, and baked potatoes. I watched them chat while carrying things. After 4 trips, they brought back a lot of items that were now lying on the bed in the master bedroom. Over a late dinner, I learned that Amanda was flying to New York at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. Helen and I would be moving her things the next day. I enjoyed seeing the girls overeating. We were all drinking coffee when my cell phone rang. The only people who had this number other than those present were the FBI agents. I answered, "Hello, Mr. Masters. This is Doug Dale. Just wanted to let you know that DNA tests have confirmed that you are Miranda's father. We received the results about 2 hours ago. We told her she wants to go home. We've arranged for her to fly to Cape for 7:30 Monday morning." "That's great," I said. "Helen and I will meet her there." "Great. We knew Amanda was headed to you last night. Let me know if her sister saw a copy of that article online," Doug said. "You might be interested to know that when we told Ronald Peterson, he was shocked. It turned out that Adelia convinced him that Miranda was his daughter. That doesn't change anything, he's still looking at the long term. Just a quick question, when everything calms down, what are my daughter's legal names?" I asked. "Their legal names are Masters. We received the court order on this matter Friday morning. A copy of the federal court order will allow you to change their identification cards. It will arrive at your office on Monday," Doug replied, ending the conversation. I couldn't hold back the tears, they flowed uncontrollably. I was excited and couldn't speak. Both Helen and Amanda became worried. Fortunately, I quickly regained my composure. "Miranda will arrive at the airport at 7:30 on Monday morning. DNA tests have confirmed that she is my daughter," I said. When they told Ronald Peterson, he was shocked. Adelia convinced him that she was his daughter. "I knew it," Helen said. "Has my cousin Adelia ever told anyone the truth?" "Amanda, I have bad news. You have to change your last name back to Masters because the federal court ruled your adoption invalid," I said. My daughter ran into my arms crying. The last name Peterson never felt right. We saw Amanda off at the airport as she headed back to New York to pack her things. We then went to meet Helen's brothers and their wives at Jackson. They helped us move her furniture. Since I had only furnished 2 of the 4 bedrooms, we had plenty of space to fit her things. The entire story was published in Sunday's edition of the Southeast Missourian. We met them at the Hickory House restaurant for breakfast. Everyone noticed that Helen's face was glowing with happiness. Her sisters-in-law noted that in 6 months I would gain weight with her cooking. The owner of the restaurant, an old friend, said, "Congratulations, John. This breakfast is on us." We managed everything in one long day. I think Helen's sisters-in-law were envious of her new home. We invited everyone to join us for dinner, but they declined. However, they did mention they would definitely come to our first housewarming party when our whole family would be together. On Monday morning, we arrived at the airport at 7:15, as flights sometimes land early. Helen informed everyone who needed to know that we would not be there today. The response was, "We realized it when we read the Sunday newspaper." I watched as Miranda walked down from the small plane towards me, dressed in jeans and a top. I found it hard to believe how much she had changed. The last time I saw her, she was a teenager with pigtails. Now, a stunning young lady was approaching me. As soon as she saw me, she ran towards me. The sliding doors opened to let her run inside. She screamed "Daddy" and literally jumped into my arms. We both let our emotions flow freely, and all this was captured by cameras. We didn't care. I heard Helen tell the station reporter from Cavos 12, "This is John Masters and his youngest daughter, who half the town thought was dead." It turns out they were kidnapped over 5 years ago. The FBI has her mother and her lover in prison. This is the first time they've seen each other in 5 years. We turned to the reporter. "I'm Miranda Masters. This is my father, John Masters. 5 years ago, we were kidnapped with the help of my mother's family. They spread false rumors about my father. It's not true. Our mother and her family may have done such things, but our father did not and would never do. Whoever tries to harm him in the future will have to deal with us. We are a family and will support each other. My mother told us when she divorced my father that he was just a man getting his due. None of us deserved what she did to me. He is not just my father, he is also the most honest person I have ever known." I introduced Miranda to Helen. Miranda hugged her and said, "Amanda and I had a long talk yesterday about everything we learned. It turns out that our mother lied and misled Ronald just as much as she did our father. In her desire to be the center of attention, she almost destroyed 5 lives. We know you and Dad are going to get married, so as far as Amanda and I are concerned, we want to forget about the past. Okay, Mom, Helen said, bursting into tears. You couldn't have said it better, Miranda. I'll do it if you promise to be one of my bridesmaids. Let's go get breakfast and then buy you some clothes at Macy's, I suggested. Can I go to Denny's? Miranda asked. If they're still open. But the closest place for breakfast is Huddle House, I replied. If that suits you, Miranda said. It was satisfying, and I was surprised at how much my youngest could eat. I thought it might be cheaper to feed her somewhere else. I still couldn't believe I had a new beginning. My daughters had come back into my life in a way I never dreamed possible. We no longer slept in the house, it felt like a real home. While we were at Macy's, I deliberately wandered off and walked away. There's something a bit awkward about watching women discuss lingerie and personal items. When they noticed I was missing, I was almost back. Helen asked where I had gone, and I said I was going to the restroom. I sat and watched Miranda try on things. For some reason, she wanted my approval. Honestly, I thought she would look good in anything. 3 $100 purchases later, we walked out with 2 bags. When we got home, Helen showed Miranda the now furnished 4 bedrooms upstairs. Helen was delighted when Miranda chose a room with furniture from her master bedroom. We sat on the patio, enjoying the space before it got too hot. The women drank iced tea, and I drank cold beer. I stood up, walked over to Helen, took the box with the ring out of my pocket, and dropped to one knee, catching her by surprise since I hadn't formally proposed. I opened the box containing the set of rings and asked, "Will you marry me as soon as my divorce is finalized?" "Of course," she said, and I was delighted. Miranda took a photo and sent it to Amanda with the text, "Yes, it fits." I found out her ring size from her brother. About half an hour later, Helen received an unexpected call. Miranda and I looked at her with concern as she suddenly began to cry. I didn't understand until she handed me her phone. As soon as the person on the other end said, "Congratulations, Daddy," I knew it was my eldest daughter. "Are you on your way already?" I asked. "I left at 4 o'clock yesterday, driving almost non-stop," Amanda explained. "At night there's less traffic and police on the highway. My car easily goes over 100. Tell my sister that I brought her things." "I'll let you know," I said. I asked how long she had left to travel. "What time is it there?" Amanda asked. "About 2 o'clock in the afternoon," I replied. "Need some help finding my way?" "I just took the exit to Cape," she said. "I'll send you a text with instructions," I said. I did, and didn't know whether to be proud or frustrated since it turned out she had been driving for 24 hours without stopping. The girls heard the car approaching and waited for it at the door. When Amanda finally got out, she looked tired but okay. Suddenly, it hit me, I saw my 3 daughters together. The first thing Amanda did was look at Helen's ring. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I rushed to answer it. "John, we're in a bit of a bind today," Chris said. "Some of the clients we lost because of the rumors are coming back, and we have a lot of new ones wanting to make appointments, many of them from out of state. If this continues, we'll need to hire more staff. We're working on it. My daughter Amanda will start working as a junior next week. She's inexperienced, but she's studying for an MBA," I said. "Can I have her on my team?" Chris asked. "The work will be demanding, but she'll pick it up quickly." "Yes, Chris," I agreed. Chris was energetic and ambitious. I hired him right out of college with honors. Like all of us, he learned through challenges and made up for his mistakes over time. He quickly realized that the business theories taught in school had limited real-world application. He knew it and was not ashamed to admit it. Everyone who worked under him learned in the same way. His approach was to correct someone's mistakes on the spot and explain why their approach was wrong. In his view, the only wrong question was the one you didn't ask. "Chris, Helen, and I are taking the weekend off. We still have a lot to sort out," I said. "With our engagement and the return of our daughters, we have legal matters to resolve, plus we need to register Miranda in school." "Engagement? Wow. By the way, we have a letter from the FBI. Can you pick it up at 5 o'clock? Chris asked. Damn, thanks for the reminder. I completely forgot, I said before saying goodbye. At 4:30, we all headed into town. We decided to celebrate our first formal family dinner at Red Lobster, my daughter's restaurant of choice. I stopped in front of the office and asked Amanda if she wanted to see her future job site. She said yes, and we all went inside. As we entered, the secretary stood up and led us into the largest conference room. Inside was a large cake and a huge banner that read congratulations. Amanda met her new boss, and everyone welcomed my new family. It was noticeable that my daughters were already calling Helen Mom. We finally got to the restaurant around 6:30. It was during an all-you-can-eat promotion, so my daughters stopped counting after 140 shrimp. They couldn't believe that I was now eating raw lemons like most people eat oranges. My daughters and I read the judgment together. The first thing the judge noted was that the document was found on a website that didn't require a lawyer to create. The second thing experts noted was that John Allen Masters' signature had been circled in order to copy it, causing significant disruption in the ink flow. Comparing each signature on the document, the breaks were inconsistent, establishing a pattern developing over time. Third, I had never used my full middle name in my signature. The fourth clue was that the date of the signature, according to witnesses, was after we left Missouri. The second page contained the court's decision that Amanda and Miranda Peterson were never their legal names. Therefore, in the eyes of the court, they have always been Amanda Masters and Miranda Masters, and all their documents must be changed to reflect this. We spent a week solving legal issues. First, we tackled Social Security, then the state advocate's office to restore their birth certificates with their original names. We then went to the DMV to get new driver's licenses with their original names. It was personally rewarding to sit across from the same school principal who had told me where to go 5 years ago to enroll Miranda in 11th grade. The last thing I did on Thursday was buy them new cell phones. On Friday, I asked Amanda and Miranda to follow Helen and me to the Gross Ford dealership in Jackson. Helen approved trading in her car along with Amanda's car. The girls chose new 2019 Ford Escape vehicles for lease with the option to buy through my company. When I got home, I wrote Amanda a check for the amount we were given for her old car as a down payment. My divorce lawyer called for the first time in 5 years. My daughters and I were scheduled to attend a hearing set for 1 p.m. on Monday. I asked Helen if she wanted to come with us. She replied, yes. We all sat in front of Judge Donald McDonald, watching as Adelia Lynn Peterson appeared on the big screen in front of us. Without her luxury, she looked unimpressive. The orange jumpsuit clearly didn't suit her. The judge asked her lawyer if he had anything to say about the contempt charge. He said his client claimed she didn't realize she had to be in court that day. The judge asked the lawyer if he had reminded her of this numerous times during the settlement negotiations. He answered yes. Are you so incompetent in your field as to believe that the accused can tell the truth? The judge asked. The lawyer replied no. How does your client wish to respond? No objection, Your Honor, the lawyer said. The judge coldly responded, I sentence her to 5 years, to be served after any federal term. Isn't that too harsh, Your Honor? The lawyer asked. Judge McDonald replied, no, in my view, but she has the right to appeal. As for the divorce, it is granted in favor of Mr. Masters. All assets remaining from their marriage are forfeited by her from the day she left the state with their minor daughters. The judge then turned to my lawyer and added, prepare a divorce decree and include a waiver of the mandatory waiting period. I think your client has waited long enough. Yes, Your Honor, my lawyer replied. My client has one more request he would like you to consider. What is it? Donald asked, looking at me with a question in his eyes. He has recently become engaged to Miss Helen Beard and would like you to perform a civil ceremony when they marry, my lawyer said. Helen and the girls almost jumped out of their seats. I had a big smile on my face. My lawyer and I had anticipated this might happen. If it did, he would use the funds I had provided to cover the lease of the cars, transfer ownership of the cars to Helen and the girls, and return the rest to me by check. I will honor and congratulate both of them. It's well overdue, the judge said with a broad smile. We all saw Adelia's face on the screen. She looked shocked. I think she expected a lighter sentence, not realizing the time would be more substantial. It must have been particularly painful for her to hear about my engagement to her younger cousin in court. The judge lowered his gavel and said, "The trial is concluded." As we stood up to leave, the judge approached me and shook my hand. I introduced him to my future wife and daughters, and he spoke to them with respect, saying, "I'm not on the bench now, so just enjoy." Before we left, he said, "John, we should go fishing before it gets too hot." I don't think anyone has ever seen 3 girls more excited than mine. They all began talking at once. Used to silence, I started to think about earplugs. That was when I noticed a couple quietly leaving the court. It felt like a shock. These were the last people I expected to see. It was my parents. As my father had said when he ended our relationship and distanced himself from me, forgiveness is easy, forgetting is not. I learned how true that was. Nothing makes girls happier than planning a wedding. That filled our home when we returned to our routine. Helen has put her house up for sale. Amanda has integrated perfectly into my team. She was noted for her sharp and insightful mind. Miranda reconnected with several old friends. In the first week, Masters Consulting was overwhelmed with work as we signed 2 new corporate contracts requiring a complete restructuring and a significant capital injection. Amanda surprised us all by identifying overlooked issues that were costing our clients millions in potential sales. It took her 3 weeks to fix this, and the resulting increase in sales was impressive. Helen and I were lying in bed, just cuddling. She was adjusting to her role as a mother, just as I was adjusting to being a father. "You know, honey, my biological clock is ticking. How long do you think we should wait before we try to have 1 or 2 of our own?" Helen asked, looking at me with dreamy eyes. I had to admit that I had never considered it before, but I knew that after everything she had been through with me, I had no right to refuse. "Let me answer your question this way. As long as you don't appear pregnant in our wedding photos, I'll leave it up to you," I said. I don't think I need to explain why we didn't sleep much that night. We finally said our vows on Mother's Day. Amanda was a bridesmaid, Miranda and another niece were also bridesmaids, Chris Aker was my best man, and my 2 nephews were groomsmen. It was a small ceremony in our backyard with a lake in the background. Helen's brothers prepared the yard. The judge married us under an arch of spring flowers. All the men wore jeans, cowboy hats, and matching boots. The women were dressed in their finest, with Helen in a traditional white wedding dress and her bridesmaids in yellow dresses. Her extended family hosted a fabulous barbecue dinner that night. Our terrace turned into a large dance floor with live music. Life continued. A criminal trial began against Adelia and Ronald. Ronald filed for divorce. My civil attorney discussed the case with their attorneys and the Bank of America legal team. Our first Father's Day as a new family was approaching. I knew my wife and daughters were planning something, but I didn't know what. On Father's Day, Helen and I were on the lake in our canoe at dawn, fishing. The fish were biting well. It seemed like as soon as the fly touched the water, it was immediately grabbed. In less than an hour, we had caught our full limit. Just before we started heading back to shore, Helen gave me a card she had hidden. I opened it to find it read, "Happy Father's Day, Daddy. We're pregnant and it's a boy." I jumped for joy and capsized the canoe, losing everything, fish, fishing rods, and a box of bait. We returned to shore in the wet canoe. When the girls found out how I received the news, they thought it was funny. They had already been informed of Helen's good news. It took some time for everything to fall into place, but that's not always the case. Everything changed for me when I witnessed the birth of my son. He came into the world crying and weighing 7 pounds. My mother was taken aback when I called and asked her to come to the maternity hospital as soon as possible. When she arrived, I quickly took her to Helen's room, where she was with our son. "His name is Colleen Richard," I told her. My mother was moved. It was the name of her grandfather. As for my father and me, we still don't communicate. He should make the effort to come to me, but he hasn't done so yet. But each day is a new opportunity, and life continues. What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, finding out about cheating after divorce is not because of cheating is the worst, because you realize that you have not lived the life you could have lived. What's your impression? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.